So here's the beginning of module number 5, where we look at visualization and the difference between having a clustered visual aid and a well-organized visual aid. This is something that I continue to struggle with, especially with how I format my slides. Um, you try to get as much information on there as possible, but that can also have its negative effects. For student learning. So in this PowerPoint, I will explain kind of the difference of having a cluttered or clustered visual aid and a more well organized visual aid. All right, so there are 3 different categories of hypermedia visualization. The first is typography, and this looks at the different types of fonts that you use for your visual aids. If you highlight certain text, or even just the length and how many words or letters you have in each line that you present. Basically, the general formatting of your visual aids. The next category is screen design. This looks at the amount of information presented, how you group your information, if you use bullet points or different types of sequences to help students see chronological order or make connections between certain content. And the third category of hypermedia visualization is media, and this is where you use different types of media other than just text within your visuals. So things like music, um, images, videos, audio, things like that that can help enhance your visual displays. So first category we'll look at is the typography. Focus on size of your visual aids. Okay, for body text, the minimum should be about 24-point font. This current PowerPoint slide for the body has a 28-point font, and then the title text minimum should be 44-point font, and all my titles for each slide are at 44 uh, at a 44-point font. It is so the best way to kind of test if your text is big enough is to actually print out your visual aids, lay it on the floor, stand on a chair, and look down and see if it's easily readable. Your display should pop off the screen. If you are presenting to students, in my case, I'm a teacher, you would want the text to be nice and big so everyone in the room can see without, having to strain their eyes or have to move seats or things like that. Okay, the next thing is different types of fonts within the category of typography. So different types of font faces. Arial is probably the easiest to read. Um, Black Blackadder ITC is a little bit harder to read. Now looking at my PowerPoint slide, I actually put that font there as an example, but it's a cursive type lettering where if you were sitting kind of across the room, it would be very hard to pick up. Some attributes, different types of way you present the fonts. So things like mixed case, you want to have mixed case letters. You do not want to have all caps except for titles. It's just kind of distracting, takes away from the other content that's displayed on your slide. It should be no more than 2 different types of attributes contributed or added to your text. So you shouldn't have like a different color, underlined, bolded, italicized, different type of fonts that are hard to read, or using all caps letters. You should not use more than 2 different types of attributes. So for instance, you can maybe put something in bold and underline it as well, but you do not want to do more than that. Some general um, issues with typography. First would be the alignment. You want to have your body text and title to be aligned to the left, and nothing should ever be justified. You can have some things that are in the middle, but nothing should ever be justified on a PowerPoint slide. I guess that can also depend on the different types of layouts that you have, but a more professional look, nothing should be justified. Also, try to avoid using abbreviations and different acronyms because you can't assume that everyone in your audience knows what each abbreviation or acronym stands for. So I just use the example of PE. Does it mean physical education, pulmonary embolism, or whatever the case may be? I'm a social science history teacher. I try to shorten some of the terms up, and I do get a lot of questions from my students like, what does GOV apostrophe T stand for, and things like that, which actually slows down the lesson. And for some students that are too shy to ask, or just don't speak up about certain acronyms or abbreviations, might this information just might kind of go straight over their head. So try to avoid using abbreviations. I know we're trying to keep slides to a minimum, or information on the slides to a minimum, but try to avoid using abbreviations and acronyms. Punctuation, try to use minimal punctuation or none at all. PowerPoint slides should just be a lot more loosely based. Doesn't have to be very structured in the terms of using different punctuations and things like that. The next category is screen design. So you want to be brief, kind of just put on your slides your key points that you want to address, and then you kind of elaborate on what you have on your visual aid. So be as brief as you possibly can on your visualizations, which will help you avoid having a clustered visual aid. Okay, spacing is very important. Do not clutter your aid. You want to see as much white space or background space as possible. Do not put more than you need on the screen. I do, like I mentioned before, I do catch myself. Sometimes I'm trying to get a vocabulary word across to my students, and I might have too much information on the slide. One, it kind of turns off the student. They don't really want to pay attention anymore because there's just too much on the slide, and also it kind of it's hard for them to take notes because most of the time they're trying to copy down everything word for word, but keeping it short and simple, they're able to kind of paraphrase and write their definitions in their own words. So try not to put as much on the screen, just whatever you need to kind of get you through the lesson or get you through your presentation. Next thing, lists must have an order and it needs to make sense. So if you're using number bullet list or letter list, it must have an order and kind of relate to each other when you're grouping information. You do not want to use too many bullet points. You can have as many slides as you want on PowerPoint or different media tools, so try to avoid using too many bullet points, and this kind of just goes back to not having more information than you need on each slide, and put items that are similar together, which is obvious. So anything that, if you're talking about similar topics, those should be together on the same uh, page or visual aid. In terms of media, try not to use too much media. I actually have experience with this. I try to present my students with different types of links to videos concerning issues surrounding the Rio Olympics. And, I showed them one or two videos. After that, I continued to show them videos, and they started to kind of lose interest. So try to use, a good amount of media, uh, enough to make it enhance your presentation and spark more interest on what you're talking about. Media must have a connection to the topics. Obviously, whatever you bring into your visualization, it needs to connect to whatever the topic you're talking about. And then remember to use reliable sources when using different types of media, because there's so many sources out there, so many avenues to get information. Make sure we're using reliable sources. So here's just two examples of different types of visualization. This would be an example of a clustered or cluttered visualization. You could tell the font is kind of hard to read. The background has a little bit too much media going on, too many bullet points, and it's just kind of busy. It's hard for you to focus on the main point of this slide, which is these bullet points here on the side. And then lastly, here's a pretty good example of a well-organized visual aid. The pictures um, are nice and situated. The format, the font's big enough where everyone in the room would be able to read. They also kind of write just what they need to kind of help you understand what these pictures are trying to show you. So obviously you might want to stay away from using too many images on one slide, but I think for the most part this is a pretty well put together visual aid. So overall, our big topics are, typography, the different types of font and text that you use, different types of screen media, different types of screen designs that will help you on how you group your stuff, or group your bullet points and how you format it. And then lastly would be the media and different types of sources you would like to incorporate with your hypermedia visualization. So this was my PowerPoint on clustered visualization versus a well-organized visualization. Thank you.